All right. Hello and welcome to this week's lecture around direct assistance to teachers. So, this chapter veers off. It doesn't really veer off. It continues in this process of examining how we supervise teachers inside schools, and this one separates out the notion of the formal summative evaluation from other processes that we might be using. So let's look at some of the pieces here. So this is really talking about clinical supervision, this idea of working to improve instruction, um, and to really focus ourselves in on instruction. So the text outlined 9 various characteristics, and here are the first 5. And I think number 5 is an important one. There needs to be a lot of mutual trust between the supervisor and the teacher. And remember, this supervisor, we're using the word, and our authors are using the word supervisor to note that it's not necessarily a positional administrator. This could be a teacher leader, peer coach, something along those lines that maybe that high degree of mutual trust might be easier to develop and to assure because there's not that other piece of the process, that summative piece of the process as part of it. And here are the remaining 4 characteristics of clinical supervision. And again, I think numbers 8 and 9 are interesting in terms of it assumes that the supervisor has expertise in instruction analysis, so that there is a level of capacity and competency within the supervisor that has been developed that I think helps build some of that mutual trust. And then that there is this intentional training and that we're continuing to refine and practice that. But when we look at the steps of clinical supervision, pre-conference, observation, analysis of planning, post-conference, and critique of the previous steps, these five steps in this process, they feel very much like the evaluation process, right? Like that process that you go through, the process that you're using in your assignments for this class, the process that your principals or administrators are using in the teacher performance component of your evaluation. So it looks very similar, but it serves some very different functions, right? And here's a reproduction from the text of some of the kinds of things that we would see in the instructional improvement planning of the post-conference, right? So, or this could be used. This would actually be. This is. I'm sorry. This is actually the pre-conference of type of information, and that when you set up that in that pre-conference, you're going ahead and setting up for maybe the post-conference as well as the next pre-conference, right? So you're developing this as a planning tool. So, as I said, this is different from teacher evaluation, but it is consistent with the notions that we see within formative evaluation. How do we provide input to improve practice, which is really what we talk about when we talk about formative assessments of students, right? Formative assessment of students isn't about deciding whether they know what they're supposed to know. It's to help inform how we shape their learning from that point forward. Formative evaluation would be, again, this notion of how do we provide engage in a feedback loop that allows teachers to have information to shape their instruction from this point forward. And it's not consistent with summative evaluation. These decisions about continued employment and hiring, firing and reassignment and or merit pay or any of those kinds of things, this is not consistent with those things because those things bring with them an inherent lack of trust. There is this waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of sensation in that process, and so as a result, it doesn't lead to the kind of openness and trust that are required in order to be successful in that realm. Um, the book is, we spent a lot of time in this book talking about this notion of developmental supervision and what kinds of different pieces. And again, the authors kind of note that in their mind, directive control is not consistent because we want clinical supervision to be this kind of give and take kind of opportunity and process. The authors also then go in and talk about notions about peer coaching programs and how it may dovetail into this notion of clinical supervision, having expert and mentor-mentee kind of processing, or peer co-developers of each other. But I think the thing that's really important here is I'm sorry, I thought I had a slide, but I don't. But the second bullet, preparation. I've often talked with pre-service teachers and in-service teachers about the effectiveness and the importance of using cooperative learning within classrooms and those kinds of things, and that slamming four desks together does not lead to cooperative learning. That we need to prepare students to engage in that kind of work, help them understand what the expectations are, help them to understand the various roles and the ways in which that process works, to provide space for practice that then allows for improvement of the practice before we put ourselves into actual use of the practice. And the same goes with this kind of peer coaching, right? We have to be able to spend time to help teachers understand what it means and how they go about it. We can't just say, "Hey, you're going to provide peer coaching to this other teacher." And we see some districts, some states that have developed notions of mentor preparation programming, where teachers that are going to be in the mentor role go through a series of process to become certified or become acknowledged within the district as having the knowledges, skills, and dispositions of what the district hopes a mentor will provide to a mentee. And this is a similar kind of notion, right? This is this kind of idea that we want to have teachers be prepared for this. And so if we're going to use a peer developer, a co-developer kind of notion, both teachers are engaging with each other in this very collaborative and non-directive kind of way to develop each other, but they need to understand what it is that they're looking for. Like we're going through in this process of this course to you will be farther along to be able to be a peer coach because we're engaging and you're receiving feedback in this observation protocol. All right, how do we do this? How do we go about this process? Other forms of direct assistance to teachers, we see co-teaching in here. Co-teaching is a very popular model. We're seeing it used a fair amount within special ed, but we also see co-teaching used where there are natural overlaps in content. I used to provide an interdisciplinary set of courses at my high school that were an English course and a social studies course co-taught by an English teacher, social studies teacher. It's a 2-hour block in which those teachers had the same group of students, and where content naturally overlapped, they capitalized on that. So if the world history class is studying the Greeks, then they may be reading in the English class Antigone and looking at Greek tragedy. And so that's a cultural overlap. That's a way to infuse how the art of the time is reflective of the society that they were studying. So they look for those natural kinds of overlaps. And so that was a different kind of co-teaching model than maybe what we think of or see within the special ed realm, where we see special ed certified special ed staff working in classrooms with gen ed staff with a mixed population to provide additional support for students with IEPs, but at the same time providing additional support to students without IEPs. So how does that look? How does that work? Other kinds of direct assistance that we might be providing. We mentioned mentoring as another kind of tool that we might be using. All right, that concludes this week's session. So this week's lecture, and look forward to the discussion coming up soon. Thanks.